Guys, it is not common on Telling Everybody Everything that we will have a guest. And by the way, welcome to another episode of Telling Everybody Everything. Sometimes Bobby wanders into the podcast studio. Sometimes my daughter Violet is a guest. Sometimes I will ring my sister. Today we're in an actual podcast studio at Acast because I have the most special guest. And I've written an introduction for her. I know you're used to unprofessionalism, but here we go. A guest who's not afraid to ruffle feathers in the name of child advocacy. While she's a champion of the critical role parents play in early childhood, she's equally passionate about the systemic institutional support families need to thrive in the modern world. Her dedication to children's mental health and her critique of how capitalist work structure strains family life is thoughtful, sometimes divisive, but always thought-provoking. And she's now helping families navigate one of life's most challenging transitions with the compassionate, actionable roadmap she offers in her newest book, The Child Healthy Divorce. I am thrilled and terrified to welcome brilliant psychoanalyst, author, and parent guidance expert, Erica Komisar. Hello.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
I cannot believe that you have come. You're so busy in London. You've been on the ACTUAL Kardashians program. Can I ask you how that came about, by the way? Does Courtney just reach out? Because I know she's an attachment parent, as I am.
Yeah, she just reached out, and we reached back, and that's how it happened. It really, we started to talk about parenting, and she said, you know, I'd really like you to come on the show. And so, it was really an adventure.
And how does Kourtney Kardashian reach out to someone like you? Did she slide into the DMs, or her people reached out to yours?
I think it was in the DMs.
That's so funny.
I think it was in the DMs, yeah. The internet's an amazing and democratic place.
It is a very democratic place.
Yeah.
And then did your profile just soar after that? Because I was already a huge Erica Komisar fan. But what happened post-Kardashian effect?
I think I probably got some younger viewers and maybe some more liberal viewers, because I myself am sort of centrist and socially liberal. The sad thing for me is I sort of got pegged in a conservative way, but I'm not really politically conservative. But it's just that the people that will listen to what I have to say, I guess, are more conservative, which, again, I find that a shame, too, because what I talk about is not political. It's just about child development and what children need to grow up healthy. And so, I think I got some younger viewers, which is a good thing.
And I'm glad that you brought that up, because I was going to ask you about that. As a left-wing feminist myself, I have a lot of left-wing listeners. Anytime I bring you up, because I do talk about you all the time, and even my own, I'll call them values when it comes to parenting and the style that I raise my children with. There will be women especially who reach out and they go, no, this is very dangerous. This is like you're being farmed by the alt-right. It feeds into this idea of women staying home, trad wives being submissive to your husband. What do you have to say about that?
It sounds like my 22-year-old daughter who said the same thing to me.
Did she?
She's actually a good guide. She now guides me towards which conferences I'm allowed to speak at and which ones I shouldn't speak at. And so she's sort of helped me. But what I would say is sometimes the inconvenient truth can make you feel badly. And the inconvenient truth has nothing to do with politics. And it's non-binary in a different way than we use non-binary today. It's not really about staying home and being a trad wife, and it's not about going to work and leaving your children 10 hours a day. It's about the fact that children have irreducible needs in the first 3 years. They have a tremendous need for their mother's bodies. There's no other way to say it. They need the attachment security in the first 3 years. The first year, they actually need your body. And then the next 2 years, they need to be able to touch base with your body when they're in distress. And so that's just an irreducible need. The other thing is that women should have the ability to fluidly move in and out of their professional careers. This is not about not working or working. It's about the ability for women to listen to their evolutionary instincts to care for their own children at a time when their children need the most. And society hasn't made that easy. And in a way, as women, we haven't made that easy because, the idea that we can step out of our roles professionally and either take a pause or titrate down our careers for a time. And then when our children get older, ramp them up again. I think nobody wants to talk about menopause. So I'm almost 62 years old. And I can tell you when I was going through menopause, men's testosterone goes down at that time and their energy levels and they're all like, I want to retire. And women's testosterone goes up in menopause and suddenly they become like dynamos, like steam engines. And so, you have this tremendous ability, even in perimenopause, to like say, let's go. What am I going to do? What business am I going to start? Do I want to go back to school? And so we don't talk about it to young women and say, you can have this fabulous career when you're really young, before you have kids. And then when you have kids, titrate it down, regulate it so the children are the center of your life, but the work works around the children instead of the other way around. And then when your children are grown, go back to, being a dynamo. But so we don't let women do that, to fluidly move in out. Women have seasons to life. That's not a political idea. That's just a biological one.
And I know that a lot of your work is based in neuroscience and attachment. And I feel like I've always understood the nuance that your criticism has been of maybe Western capitalism or the social structure that fails to allow women this fluency, not of individual mothers' morals themselves. No. But I just don't feel that you and I have had the same review of perimenopause and menopause, because you are a dynamo. Yeah. A lot of women talk to me about perimenopause and they say it's really bad and you feel sick and you feel angry all the time and your shoulder hurts for some reason.
Yeah. So that's just that's until you get to menopause. But once you get through menopause and the symptoms go away. So what did I do? I'll tell you. I guess through the menopause, I took some vitamins. I didn't do hormones. I didn't do HRT. No, I took vitamins. I took supplements that were specific to women going through menopause. I exercised because it helped a lot. Yeah. And I got through it. I was a little uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable, but I got through it. But it was sort of once you get through the symptoms, I guess I should have made that clear. Once you get through the symptoms, then you're like, my kids are grown. Yeah. I did a great job. I have no regrets. I love them. I feel close to them. They love me. They feel close to me. And it gives you a secure base as a grown-up. Grown-ups need secure bases too. It gives you a secure base to fly. Yeah. As long as you have a supportive partner. My husband jokes. He said, when you were raising kids, I was working so hard. And he said, now I'm going to step back and retire. I'm going to be your manager and you fly. And so part of it's the right choice of a partner. If you choose a good partner who supports you and says, if you don't have a partner who says, I'm going to retire and you better come with me, or, instead you say, well, listen, you were out in the world all that time making your mark. I would like to do that now. I'd like to write a book, or I'd like to start a business, or I'd like to go back to school, or, we're going to live till, your generation's going to live to like 120 if science has it right. So that's a really long life. And if you can't just carve out a few years it doesn't have to be quitting work entirely, but if you can't just reduce your work, the best way I can say it is that for most women, they would say that their children are the center of their lives, but their time is what dictates what is the center of their life. So if you're spending an hour and a half to 2 hours a day with your child, then the center of your life is your work. And one of the things that I say to young women, liberal or conservative, it doesn't matter, is when you choose a career that you can control, that you have flexibility over. Try not to choose a career where you have a boss, if you can help it. Yeah. Because women need to be their own bosses. Mothers need to be their own bosses. And there's lots of careers like that when you're choosing a career that give you control and flexibility and don't make you work for the man. Because when you work for the man, you don't have that control.
I guess maybe where a lot of the criticism might come from, or the hurt or the guilt or the shame from any women who might push back on this idea, is I think because when I'm listening to it now, it almost seems like an idea in the middle. So if you haven't chosen a good partner and if you haven't chosen the right job, then you're in a situation where it is really difficult to prioritize the time. You know, the way that you've been able to do it is incredible, and I'm sure it took a lot of hard work. And I've also done it in a way that worked for me.
Yeah.
It took a lot of hard work, but I made some of those correct choices. I made some incorrect ones, chiefly with men. I didn't always choose the right men. For a long time I didn't, but now hopefully we'll see. If not, there's the Child Healthy Divorce book for me. But again, I think that if you just freeze time now and you go, all right, my attachment style isn't perfect. I didn't make the right choices. My parents' divorce was acrimonious. I've got these things. Yeah. I've got this shit. But if I can park it and prioritize the next generation's attachment style, maybe they'll choose the right partner. Maybe they'll have the confidence to go in the workforce the right way. Maybe you can undo ancestral trauma is what I like to refer to.
And you can. Terry Real, the famous couples therapist, you know, he gave a wonderful speech and said, you know, listen, we are all bridges to the next generation. Yeah. And the truth is that generational expression is a very important thing. We can either continue with what was done to us, or we can change course, and we can change course for the next generations. And if you're listening to this and you couldn't be with your children a lot in those early years when your heartstrings pulled you towards them and you couldn't, it's never too late. I wrote a book called Chicken Little, which was the next chapter, which was the next critical period of brain development after 0 to 3, which is 9 to 25, where once again, children are very vulnerable, and you have another opportunity to connect with them, to help them to regulate their emotions, to be there as much as possible so you can help them get through a really trying time, and which can repair a lot of what happened earlier. So it's never too late. It's not as if you missed the first critical window, like all is lost. Now, if you're listening to this and your child is over 25 and you're feeling they're disconnected from you, it's harder. But I always say where there's life, there's hope. Even over 25, if you go to your children and you say to them, I'm so sorry, and you take responsibility without justifying and rationalizing, you'd be amazed what children can forgive when you take responsibility with no justification.
Because there's a big trend now of people going no contact with their parents.
But a lot of that has to do with 3 generations of parents who are really confused about what children needed and also what they needed. You know, I mean, parents often think what they need is to have intense careers, or have, you know, they think that if they can give their children material things that, you know, and not just material, the things that capitalism does buy us, you know, financial security, you know, better schools, nicer, maybe a vacation or two, you know, that somehow nicer sneakers, that somehow they're elevating their children. And really what I'll say is that I have traveled all around the world. My husband runs a nonprofit called Vision Spring, which brings eyeglasses to the poorest people in the world. And what I will say is that happiness and love and deep emotional connection has nothing to do with how much stuff you give your children.
I mean, I'd say there's probably an inverse relationship after a certain amount.
There is. And there was a study done by a researcher at Columbia University that Sunia Luthar, she said that very affluent families and very poor families have the same amount of mental illness and the same intensity of mental illness in their children. And so, and I don't need to explain that because I think it's self-explanatory, but, you know, the idea is that when you can't give your children what they need emotionally and physically because you're very poor, it has the same impact on children when you're very wealthy and you don't give them what they need. And so that is what the study says.
Or you farm it out.
In
this country. I mean, and I know that there are socioeconomic constraints where there are people who just don't have a choice. And I was going to ask you this as well. You've referred to daycare as almost a modern-day orphanage.
Yeah.
And in terms of cortisol levels, which is really difficult for some families who have zero structural alternatives. And I talk a lot in my comedy, I guess. I was going to say my work, but let's not call it that, about early potty training, for example.
Yeah.
And I get pushback from SEN families or families who feel shamed because their child has special needs.
Yeah.
And my answer is, I'm not talking about you.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, this is the ideal
Yeah.
that I'm talking about. So,
when we should be able to talk about the ideal. I think the idea is that, well, first of all, I think you know, and maybe your listeners should know, that I fight for paid leave. I was just at a conference where I talked about the paid leave that's being proposed in Australia of 12 to 18 months. There's countries like Estonia that give 3 years of paid leave and hold women's jobs. That's probably the best situation. In America, we have nothing. We're very uncivilized. I would say when it comes to our social welfare policies and mothers and babies, we suck. And that's not saying I'm not proud to be an American in other ways, but in this way I am not. And so because, we are such an affluent country, and yet we can't offer all women, no matter what their socioeconomic status, we can't offer them the ability to nurture their own children. And we would rather talk about potentially setting up huge warehouses for children that will be very expensive, which essentially say we want it's a seduction for women who do have choice to go back to the workforce as quickly as possible. Mm-hmm. It's not about going back to the workforce. It's how quickly you're forced to go back. Yeah. I mean, so there was a survey done in America, which was 60% of mothers in America and 66% of mothers in the UK said that if given the opportunity financially, they would stay home with their children as much as possible in the first 3 years. That doesn't mean that they would stay home full time. Maybe they would reduce, So what I fight for is as much paid leave as possible, preferably 18 months. And then what we call universal family subsidies instead of stipends, instead of universal daycare, which means that the family gets the choice on how to spend the money, not the government saying, Romania did an experiment under Ceausescu and said, give us your children, we'll raise your children better than you can. And it caused havoc in those children. So we know that doesn't work. And when the government says, we'll do it better than you, we know that's a problem. So people need to know that the things that I say, what I write about, is not without activism. I'm working with Reshma Sojani in New York, who's the woman who started the organization Girls Who Code, to try to make New York State the first state that offers 12 months of paid leave under Mamdani. So I think people hear me in reels and clips on the internet, and listen, those reels and clips are meant to get attention, but the truth is that I am someone who heartily advocates for all mothers to have the choice to nurture their own children in those early years, if they choose to.
Do you know, I was thinking the other night, because I know that, I feel like I see your advocacy all the time, and I absolutely believe that it's fundamental. And I hate to say this because it does bring shame upon people. I do think for my family, it would be fundamentally wrong for us to leave a very new baby to cry until they just give up, until they just decide nobody's coming and they fall asleep. And we have had, in the latest 3 babies that I've had in the last 5 years, we've had a few sleep specialists and nannies come over, and they always say, oh no, it's not cry it out, but it always is cry it out.
It is cry it out.
It's a version of cry it out every time, and we will not do it. We co-sleep with the kids still, the 3 youngest ones. I co-slept with my older daughter until she was 10 and eventually just kicked me out. But the other night, and I am working a lot and with my children a lot, and because my children don't sleep through the night, I feel like I see them a lot, even when I'm working. Yeah. I was holding my daughter, and I was really unwell and really tired, and I just felt like angry. And I would never hurt my children, but I was patting her a little bit harder on the back, which the doula says I should be patting her harder anyway. But anyway, and I just thought to myself, oh, maybe sleep training isn't for mothers and parents to sleep and for couples to be in their own room. Maybe it's for the safety of the baby, do you think? Because it is such hard work and it's so sleepless. Maybe what I'm saying is cry it out is better than a really stretched parent who has to work all day and is up all night having some type of
Well, I think
violent reaction in the night.
I think it came out of women working. I'm going to say that. It doesn't mean it's good for babies. I think what it says is that mothers are being stretched too much. I think what it says is that mothers can't go with the rhythm of the baby. That, yes, of course, I always say to mothers, if you had to sign a contract that you're having a baby, the small print that you didn't read at the bottom said you will not sleep through the night fully for more than a day or two for 5 years with each child. And that your body is made to do this, but it's not made to also have another full-time job. And one would say that most women who work full-time outside the home, being a mother is a full-time and a half job. Because a full-time job, you come home at 7. A full-time and a half is it's 24 hours. Yeah. And so now you have 2.5 full-time jobs if you work full-time. So we're not really made to do that. And so I think that the Cry It Out method came out of mothers having 2.5 jobs. It isn't good for babies, but you know, I think there's other ways than I think having enough support. And what I say is that if you have to work full time, and this may get under people's skin, live with your mothers. Live with your aunt, live with a sister, get a doula that you bargain with, you know, tell your husband he's got to support you in the middle of the night. You know, you can't do it alone. Women never did it alone. We always had women. We always had the red tent around us. We always had other women around us. We never lived in isolation in homes of our own. It just wasn't a thing. Yeah. And so get support rather than sleep train your baby. That's what I would say. But it's not natural. Mothers' bodies are being asked to do things now, working outside the home and caring for babies, that it's not natural for mothers. So it means that we have asked the impossible of mothers, and mothers, the postpartum depression rates in America are at least 1 in 6. That's very high. And that's just the reported cases. That's not the unreported cases. So we know that mothers are not doing okay. And why we insist that we keep going and push them harder and drive them faster and harder, rather than taking a look and saying, actually, mothering is supposed to be really pleasurable and it's supposed to be slow. I think it was the 80s. There was something called the slow movement where they were telling you, I remember laughing at it because I was young, eat slowly, chew your food 20 times, walk slowly, breathe slowly, you know. And what it was saying is we were becoming, and this was, 40 years ago, we were becoming a society that was doing everything fast and intensely and expecting too much of people. We've expected too much of mothers. So mothers are breaking down. And because mothers are breaking down, babies are breaking down.
What is the repair then in the adolescent phase? If you did sleep train because your mother-in-law told you to, everybody told you to. And
which is a problem too. You know, again, it's generational expression. But the repair is that it's not really that different than when your child is 0 to 3. You're having to do a lot of emotional regulation. So the biological things that mothers do in the first 3 years for children is, 1, they regulate their emotions from moment to moment by soothing them when they're in distress. John Bowlby, the father of attachment, said, the primary attachment figure, the person who makes that baby feel the safest in the world, is the person who soothes the baby from moment to moment throughout the day. And so that is a biological function, not just an emotional one. And then the mother also buffers the baby from stress and helps them to process the stress that they are experiencing. So we do the same thing when our children are going through adolescence. We process. I always call mothers are actually parents and adolescents, fathers too, are the emotional digestive system for babies. They are also the emotional digestive system for adolescents, meaning adolescents, because there's sort of this wormhole between early childhood and adolescence, and a lot of the same things are happening again. It's sort of like deja vu all over again, or Groundhog Day. The concept is mothers and fathers are like your liver or pancreas, but they're more like your stomach. They help to digest very difficult experiences, feelings, relationships, and the more you can be there for them in adolescence, the better, because there's so much going on for them. So that's how you repair, and there's no mystery to it. You try to do as much of what you couldn't do when they were little, including lots of physical affection. Now, adolescents will often push you away, but you try to touch them as much as possible, hug them side by side, rubbing shoulders, holding their hands when they'll let you. Whenever you can sneak in affection. Physical affection with babies lowers the cortisol, higher oxytocin. You do the same thing with adolescents.
I'm worried that I've flipped it, that I really nail the 0 to 3. I'm so good at 0 to 3.
Yeah.
And then I think I dropped the ball in adolescence. I'm not
so
as
you
good
can
at that
pick it up again, because the ball is right there on the ground. It didn't go anywhere.
Okay.
Yeah.
But maybe I did such a good job 0 to 3.
It helps. It helps. It gives you a lot of leeway, right? It sort of lays down a foundation, but you do have to do it again. The way I would describe it is that 0 to 3, if you're a gardener, I garden, and I have a big vegetable garden in Connecticut where we live most of the time. So it's like growing a garden from 0 to 3. And by the age of 3, that garden is 85% full of fruits and vegetables, and then from about 3 until about 9, the garden continues to grow another 15 or 20%. But it overgrows. So let's say it grows another 40%. And now you have like an overgrown garden. Anyone who gardens knows that you have to prune the garden and cut back the plants. Otherwise they die, they suffocate. So the brain is like that. There is an excess of growth, and adolescence is vulnerable again, and vulnerable to the environment again, and you're the environment. You're part of the environment. The thing about adolescence is their environment gets bigger.
Right.
When you have them as a baby, you have a captive audience because you are their environment. When the environment gets bigger, they have friends, school, social media.
The manosphere in the garden.
The manosphere. So and the more you can give them early, the easier it is to deal with the pruning of the garden later.
Well, I love your first 2 books, and then I've been listening to the audio. I mean, I say I read books. I'm listening to them in the car. I want to talk about the child healthy divorce. Yeah. And you open that book by stating that a good divorce is better than a bad marriage, but that still isn't easy on children. So what is the number one mistake that well-meaning parents make when first sitting down to tell their children that they're separating?
Well, first they have to understand that children, when you get divorced or separated or break up, you've broken something for those children. You've broken the illusion of unconditional and permanent love. But they don't really understand the difference between the love that's broken between you and your ex and the love you have for them. And so I think often parents really forget to remind their children that it's not the same kind of love, that the love between 2 adults is unfortunately not unconditional, but the love between a parent and a child is unconditional, and you'll never, ever, ever fall out of love with them. The other mistake that parents will make is they're not sensitive about the timing of telling them. It's very important that you don't tell them when it's a holiday or it's near a birthday or they have a big game the next day or a test, or their brains associate being told. Everyone who's ever been through a divorce remembers the moment that their parents told them. And that moment is indelibly marked on their brain because it's a trauma. We have big T trauma and little T trauma, and it is a big T trauma. And we don't talk about it. It's interesting because it's probably the most common trauma. We have lots of different kinds of trauma that not everybody goes through. But if 1 in 2 marriages are breaking up, then it's probably the most common type of trauma that children are facing. And so every child remembers when they were told. And be sensitive about when you tell them. And then don't just flee from that, but process their feelings with them. And if they say, I don't want to talk about it, don't go away. Stick around. Say, it's okay. I'm going to make some soup in the kitchen, and if you want to talk about it later, and keep checking in with them and saying, I'm here if you want to talk about it. Don't what happens often is you tell children and then you both flee because it's such a hard thing. I mean, listen, divorces are painful for the adults in the room. It's just a painful process. And so it's when you're in pain as an adult, you're not always your best self.
And who I was thinking this book might be great for is married people with children, people who might be contemplating a divorce and they want to navigate that well. But also people may be processing their own parents' divorce.
Yeah.
I think it's great. And chiefly single people.
Yeah.
Because it's the single women, no single men listen to my podcast, but the single women who listen to my podcast, listener letters, which really reminded me of the case studies in your book, really put up some red flags for them, and it teaches them what to ask in a relationship, what to look out for. You kind of audition your husband in their case or your same-sex partner to be your ex before you marry them. Yeah. And some of your case studies, that was my favorite part because, well, I had many favorite parts, but I loved just the tea of it, like how juicy it was, but also, who was it? I think it was someone in Taylor, John and Taylor, and they had a little 11-month-old baby called Anne. And John was like, I deserve half. But that's really quite an attachment-sensitive age, and her mother was breastfeeding. And I'm just always floored that there are guys out there who will want to take a breastfed infant.
Oh, my goodness.
From her mother, 50-50.
I have women from all over the world writing me and calling me and asking me to do expert testimony for them. And it breaks my heart because their stories are much the same, which is that they are being asked to give up their infants who are breastfeeding, who they're sleeping with, where they're the primary attachment figure. And the court system today treats custody, the 50-50 paradigm, like splitting a sandwich in half, and doesn't really care, is very insensitive about what children need developmentally. And so one thing I say in my book is, unless you're being sexually or physically abused by your partner, if you can help it at all, stay until your youngest is 3 years of age. Because at 3 years of age, after you've given them enough emotional security, maybe then they can start to handle sleepovers at the other home. Maybe they can handle having two homes, But until then, if you can manage to hold out till 3, that's the best for your child, and also the best for you, because the pain that these mothers, the tears, the intense distress that these babies are being taken away from them. And the story is always the same. I didn't know that the court would take the baby away from me. I assumed that because I was breastfeeding and sleeping with the baby and even maybe staying home with the baby, that I would be recognized in a way as having a certain kind of priority. And I said, no. And I would say one of the greatest mistakes in divorces overall is that parents are treating children like possessions, like a material possession to be split evenly. And that's a real mistake, because at different developmental stages, children need different things.
I think staying would be really difficult because even if you weren't being actively sexually abused, once you've got what we call in this country the ick. Are you familiar with the ick in America?
Yeah, sexual abuse is off the table. If there's sexual abuse, if there's... Yeah.
But even if it's not active sexual abuse, once you're finished and someone absolutely disgusts you, unless you are a really good actor...
I'm going to say there was a I mean, I know this is a strange thing for a therapist to say, but I'll say it anyway. There was a sign on Madison Avenue in New York. I think it was for Lululemon, but I can't remember. And it said, "Fake it till you make it." And I'm going to say, you know what? You do it for your children in those years. And the only reason I say this is because it doesn't just hurt the children. It hurts the mothers. And the mothers don't realize how much it will hurt them until they go through it. And then it's too late. And so what they come to me, and then I say, is there any way to salvage it, just to live in separate bedrooms or to... And they say, I've tried and now it's too late. And so if I can warn people in advance that if there's any way, if you're not being abused, if you're being abused, you must leave. But if you just don't like the person anymore... and if you're doing it not only for your children, but for yourself, just those 3 years, because until then, giving up your children half time is very, very painful.
And you don't know who someone is until you've made them really angry.
No.
And it gives you time maybe to squirrel away savings.
Yeah,
and just
that's right. And get a job and maybe go back to school, approach it slowly. I mean, what happens, it's called a narcissistic wound for a reason. Because when you say to someone you don't want to be with them, when a woman says to a man, or a man says to a woman, I no longer want to be with you, I'm not in love with you anymore, it is such a deep cut. It is such a deep, slow, and sometimes unhealable wound that it can bring out lots of defensive aggression in people. And more than you ever know. So you may think, well, I'm divorced. So I'm not discouraging people to divorce. I don't want people to come away from this and think that I don't believe in divorce. What I'm saying is if you can help it at all, wait till 3. And then go to a mediator and talk about what's best for the child and talk about the importance of sacrifice at different times. Read the book if you can get your ex to read the book. And if you can't, be the best version of yourself you can be, because you can't change another person. You can only work on being the best version of yourself. And so if your partner is not being the best version of themselves, you can still be the best version of yourself.
I always had rules in relationships when they'd come to an end that I would not ask a question if the answer didn't matter or was going to be a lie.
Yeah.
I just wouldn't ask the question. And I think so often people want to make themselves understood.
Yeah.
They go, well, you did this. And I think that more people should embrace being the villain in someone else's life. Just go, fine.
I think that's it. I think that's the word sacrifice is something, I'm going to say that to sacrifice, or let's say to be that emotionally regulated, it requires a lot of self-awareness. It requires a lot of the ability to regulate a lot of those emotions yourself. And so, I never want to assume that people learned those things in their own childhood or it was modeled for them. But yes, you're right. It is best, particularly when you're dealing with a narcissistic personality, if that's what you're dealing with, or a borderline personality, if that's what you're dealing with, to not agitate and irritate. And that always is better. And if you're doing it for your child and you realize you're doing it for your child, there's a higher calling to it.
And I think another good piece of advice is to let them win some type of battle, and then they might put down their sword.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's how there's a very famous psychoanalyst named Kohut who talked about how reflection is very important with narcissistic people, that they were unreflected as children, and the only way that they can feel comfortable or you can heal is if you can reflect them. So lots of reflection.
Okay. In the Child Healthy Divorce, you talk about the importance of not bad-mouthing an ex-partner, which we all know you're not supposed to do that. But then what happens when you have protected a child and you've both done a good job of that?
Yeah.
And you're not dealing with a narcissist. It's just a split where you've done well, but then when the child grows into a teenager, they look at maybe a parent that's become absentee or dysfunctional, and they can see for themselves what you've tried to shield. They can see bad qualities, and you don't want to gaslight them.
It's not gaslighting, because you're not... I suppose you could learn from what therapists do. So those people who are listening who go to therapists, they see that their therapists reflect how they're feeling and ask questions about them. Yeah. And so the idea is just to turn back to your child and say, how does that make you feel that your mom or your dad, I never want to assume gender, didn't come when they were supposed to, or forgot your birthday, or, you turn to them and reflect how they're feeling, right? So it's not about you, it's about them. And so if you're always turning back to them and saying, how does that make you feel? And that you're helping them to process their emotions. And in a way, you're doing it for yourself as well. I mean, because in that moment, by hearing your child express themselves, there's something very healing for you too, much more than so the word alienation is used in court, but it's also an emotional thing. Yeah. When you badmouth your ex, you are interfering in the relationship your child has with your partner. And we know that if possible, it's really important to have two parents.
Yeah.
You know, what do they say in Great Britain? They say in UK, they say an heir and a spare. It's really important for kids to have two people who they know love them unconditionally that intensely. And if you badmouth your ex, no matter what you think of them, you're taking that away from your child.
Yeah.
So if you can help it, self-awareness has a lot to do with going through a divorce in a healthy way, and getting help yourself. You have to have a bucket to throw up in. You have to have a toilet to throw up in. Call therapist your toilet. You have to have someplace to go. If you don't believe in therapy, then find a pastoral counselor, or if you're not a person of faith, find a really good extended community and a best friend who you can share. But you have to have people that you can go to so you don't spill onto and overshare with your children, because the other thing is just even oversharing about your depression or your pain or your loneliness. These are things that, or your sex life, or these are things that children do not want to, need to, and cannot hear.
At any age in that adolescent period.
At any age, until they're adults. And when they're adults, they might come to you and say, Mom, you were pretty depressed then, but you hid it pretty well. And you can say, yeah, I was, but I didn't want to burden you. And your children will admire you for not burdening them with it. Yeah.
Unless you have a stand-up comedy career or a podcast. See, my daughter was fine with me oversharing in my work, and she understood. I think I was really transparent when she was young. This is what I do for work. Yep. It's an exaggeration of who I am at home, and I have very good boundaries around what to chat about, to do with her friendships, her relationships, and whatnot. But when all that started spilling out into TikTok, you talk about the spill. Yeah. I didn't put it on TikTok. Other people would. They would share it into her timeline. And it is the sexual stuff that she doesn't like the most. Yeah. It's not bad-mouthing anyone. It's nothing about her, but just the articulation that I have a sex life with my husband. No, she'll melt down about that.
I mean, when I give a lot of speeches, and I sometimes refer to my own children because people need to know that I'm an imperfect mother, but I'm a mother too. And I'll talk about my kids, usually in a more complimentary way, but still I'll talk about them. I'm careful, but I do. And so my kids have found a way to cope with that, which is that for the most part, they don't listen to my speeches unless they want to. And so I'll say, look, I gave a speech. It was well received. If you want to listen to it, it's there. But if you don't, it's okay. And so I give them the option to kind of not have to connect with my public image. And I think that that's a way to do it, and say, you really don't have to listen to my podcast or my humor. And if you see me on TikTok, just turn it off. I mean, that's what my kids do. And that's how they protect themselves.
You probably have a foundation of trust that they know that you're not going to cross certain boundaries. They're not going to open.
That's right.
And I've made a few mistakes, unfortunately, but overall I've been pretty good.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about blended families, because that's what I'm living in now. And I talk a lot about my life on the podcast, but I try to externalize it so it applies to other people as well. And I think a lot of the hot babes who listen will have new partners as well. Though I'm not divorced. I'm not with my daughter's father, but I've never been divorced. My husband was divorced. He didn't have children with that woman. And he's also very blasé about, he doesn't badmouth her. I think it's actually good to audition to date a divorced man. See what kind of divorced man he is.
To see how emotionally regulated he is. Because it's important to be with an emotionally regulated person.
What's your golden rule for when and how to introduce a new partner to your children?
Think about the fact that your child has just gone through a lot of loss. So, we try to protect our children from the big losses, but we can't always protect them. Things like divorce or a death in the family, or if you have to move. So there are some losses that are just you can't help. But you don't want to introduce losses that you can help. And so the idea is you want to make sure that the person that you're taking into your life is someone who's a keeper, that you've auditioned them, maybe 3 auditions, before you give them the part. And once you give them the part, that they're going to stick around. Now, there's no guarantees, but, you want to make sure this is a permanent fixture in your life, and then introduce them to your children. And don't expect your children to like them definitely don't expect your children to love them. All you need is for your children to respect your choice of them. That's all you need.
Yeah.
And that's not going to come immediately. That comes over time and with your patience and your tolerance. And you've got to give your children the permission to feel whatever the fuck they want to feel and whatever they need to feel. It might be angry. It might be sad. It might be, I don't want to have anything to do with you or your partner, or Mom, I'll be with you, but I won't look at him or talk to him. And you can't be overly sensitive about children's feelings. You have to be sensitive but not take it personally. You have to be secure enough as an adult not to personalize whatever they're feeling. And you have to have a partner who you educate to do the same and say, look, these are the ground rules. We're going to introduce you. Neither one of us we're not going to expect anything. We're going to let organically happen whatever happens, and we're going to be okay with whatever happens. And I think there's an example in the book about, what do you do if your child doesn't want to even come to your wedding and you decide to, or your ceremony or whatever. And the idea is that you have to give your children some agency because it's a very painful experience to take a new person in, because what it actually means is the end of the reunion fantasy with their other parent.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. The book is actually called Divorce, Separation, and Breakup for a reason, because a lot of people aren't married today. But the idea is that there is an illusion for a child, a fantasy of reunion, and it exists right to the moment of you being permanently with another person. And sometimes it even outlives you being permanently with another person.
Do you think all children have that reunion?
Yes.
All of them?
All of them.
Really?
And sometimes it's on the surface, sometimes it's right below the surface, and sometimes it's deeply below the surface. And sometimes it comes out in hostility towards you or your partner. Sometimes it comes out in detachment. Sometimes it comes out in rudeness. But yes, indeed. Yeah.
I think my daughter might be the first person on earth not to have that fantasy.
It's hiding in the corners of her mind.
Really?
Yeah. Unless sometimes there's very intense abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse. Sometimes when children feel so relieved to get away from an abusive parent. They live with a single mother because their father, beat their mother, and they're just so relieved to live in a peaceful environment. There are all kinds of circumstances, but for the most part, children have reunion fantasies.
Do you think I have a reunion fantasy with my own parents?
It very well could be.
That is wild.
Yeah, but you might not even know it because it might be. In other words, we have layers to our psyche. We're like an onion.
Stop, Erica. And then that's why I date men who are a bit like my dad?
Absolutely.
Stop.
We have layers to our psyche, and the idea is that some layers are harder to reach than others. And so sometimes we will get through those layers. That's what an analysis, I'm a psychoanalyst, not just a psychotherapist. So, we're trained to help people at their own pace. It's not like ketamine or, psilocybin or whatever.
Yeah.
It's which kind of tears all the layers away and people are left vulnerable. We follow the lead of our patients to help them peel back the layers when they're ready to peel back the layers, when they can be vulnerable because they trust us. But we have many layers to our psyches.
Okay. When a new partner enters a child's life around like mid-childhood, let's say age 9.
Yeah.
And then the relationship eventually breaks down between the step-parent and the child, or it becomes highly conflicted by the time that child is a teenager. How do you then advise the primary parent, me, for example, to navigate that friction, and then what sort of boundaries of a step-parent would be good with that teenager?
I think you say to your child, look, empathy is the best way. Sensitivity and empathy. Boundaries are important too, but by saying, look, this has been really hard on you. This is not something I wish that I ever had to put you through. And it's okay, whatever you feel. If you're angry at me, that's okay. If you're sad, that's okay. If you're angry at my partner choice, that's okay. We can handle it because we're the grown-ups and we can handle it. Children need to feel that you as the grown-ups can handle their feelings, can handle their anger. It's one of the most important things is that children know that you can handle their anger and aggression. And I think a lot of parents can't handle it. No. And so what it does is instead of being a container for their feelings, you become a leaky sieve. And that's not good for children. They need to know that you can handle their feelings without retaliating, without becoming defensive, without over-personalizing it, that you can remain in your adult place of being empathic and sensitive and tell them, look, whatever you're feeling, I can handle it, and I'm sorry that you've had to go through this. I truly am. By taking responsibility, I always say the first step towards repair or healing something with your child is to, without justification, without defense, without rationalizing, without a but, just take responsibility and say you're sorry, genuinely say you're sorry. It's the first step to repairing things with your kids.
And why do they need you to be able to handle their feelings? I mean, I know that's the right thing and not to take any outburst personally from a 3-year-old or a 17-year-old or anyone else, but why?
There's a ton of aggression. Well, first of all, feelings in adolescence are very intense and unregulated. So this is why it's so similar to toddlerhood, because it's so dysregulated then, and it's dysregulated again. It's hormonal, it's emotional, it's environmental. And so they need to know that they're safe, that it's a safe place where, and again, there's an analyst who uses the analogy of a container, that parents are like Tupperware. They're like a container, and that it's a safe place to bring their feelings. And that's really important in adolescence because there's so many feelings and they're so intense. And if they know that it's safe to bring those feelings to you, you won't judge them. You won't criticize them for those feelings. You won't shut them down. You won't dismiss them, but you'll just hold them. And it's okay to feel whatever they're feeling. Again, that requires that you get help for yourself, potentially, that you go to a therapist who's your container. It's like the painter painting a painting of a painter painting a painting. Yeah. You have to have someone who's holding you when you have an adolescent so you can hold your adolescent. That could be your spouse. That could be your therapist. That could be your mother. Right. That could be a dear friend. But you have to have people who can hold you so you can hold your child.
So an adolescent eviscerates you, slams the door, and you're meant to take a deep breath, sort of react appropriately, have some, not an emotional reaction.
Right, not retaliate. Right.
Put it somewhere else. Just save it for later.
Right. Are there some boundaries? Yes, there are some boundaries. You can say, look, empathy before discipline, always, whether they're toddlers or adolescents, you always want to put the empathy in there first, because if you just discipline a child and say you can't do this or you shouldn't do that, or then you've lost an opportunity to teach them something, and also they're not going to hear you as well. Yeah. Whereas if you say, look, you had a really hard day. I can see that this is really not a good time and you're upset, and but you have to pick up your clothes and put them in the hamper. Now, the thing about adolescents is they are like toddlers in that toddlers require a lot of repetition, and so do adolescents. So even though they look like they have grown-up bodies, adolescents, they're really just little kids in a big kid package. Yeah. And so you just have to know that repetition is part of the game, and patience is part of the game.
I love that. And I tell my husband all the time, it's like a bank account. This is our analogy.
Yeah.
I say you can make withdrawals if you also make deposits. So
That's
my
right.
bank account with my daughter is full because I'm making deposits all the time. I love my daughter. Right now, I think I'm.
It's more like an IRA. I don't know, like a SEP IRA. Like you can't take it out.
Right.
It's like your pension.
Yes.
You can't take it out to your 65. I don't know.
We call it an ISA.
Yeah. So the idea is that it's more like that, because you really want to put it in and put it in and put it in and put it in, and when you get the returns, you won't believe the returns. Yeah. How loving and close you'll feel to your children, how close they'll feel to you when you just keep depositing. And that, that kind of unconditional love and patience and tolerance and non-judgment, that just, as you say, it just collects interest. It compounds the interest, yeah.
Well, I love that this book especially talks about adolescents too, because it was babies and toddlers, and this is just the whole scope of the family. You noted that teenagers heading off to college really need a stable home. And I feel like that's when a lot of my friends' parents divorced during that transition.
That was a misunderstanding that parents had, that, in the old days of Judith Wallerstein saying all divorce was bad and no one should ever divorce because it screwed up children. Parents heard that and they said, right, we'll stay together till they go to college. And the minute they go to college, we'll sell the house and divorce. Yeah. What they didn't realize is that's a very pivotal point in a child's individuation, in their development as an individual, in their sense of self, where they don't feel secure. They're leaving home often for the first time, and they need to be tethered back to a very secure home that they can come back to and do the same thing they did when they were toddlers, which is what Margaret Muller called rapprochement, or emotional refueling. They need to come back and get a cuddle so they can go back into the world and figure out who they are separate from you. And so until they have friends, until they have a stable environment, until they feel secure in their environment at college or wherever they're going after they leave secondary school, you really don't want to sort of dump this on them at that time. You want to wait. If you waited that long, there are windows, what I call developmental windows, that are better than others. So 0 to 3, not a good time. 3 to 9, better, more stable time. Funny enough, that's a more stable time. Freud called it sort of a more stable time. He called it the latency period, but it's not really latent. There's a lot going on, but it's more stable. It is. It's just not as unstable. And then you have like 9 to 25, which is adolescence. But in that period, there are more stable periods. Okay. So the worst times are middle school, what I call middle school, but I don't know, in the UK we don't call it middle school, but what we call middle adolescence, which is... we
call it like A-levels, GCSEs.
That's right. Yeah. So sort of about 11 to 14 is what we call middle school in America. It's the worst time of your life. It is the worst time of your life. Your hormones are raging. You feel uncomfortable in your body. There's social drama. There's exclusion and rejection. There's the social shifting that causes, there's terrible self-consciousness. You haven't developed a deep sense of security in yourself. And so it's just a terrible time for most kids. Then they come out of that. And by the time they're like 15 or 16, there's another sort of period of more stability from about 15 till about 17. That's not a bad time, because then you still give them a year before they go to college. So if you're going to do it close to college, do it before college so you have a year to process it with them, or wait a couple of years out till they're more stable after college. So there's like periods. It's interesting. Windows that are better than other windows.
Or maybe when they go to college, you might realize that you like each other again.
That can happen.
He's not an abuser or a terrible person.
That can happen.
I think my plan, would be, and everyone should be strategic about their divorce. That's what I love about this, is that you put the children first, but there's also strategy.
Yes, there is.
And some real goalposts to aim for to make your own life easier, and hopefully to learn what to watch out for when you get married. But I think I would just plan on, I'm probably going to do this anyway, as my children grow older, just doing more things for myself, taking myself to the theater, traveling alone if I want to. Yeah. And I think men really respond well to that.
Yeah. I mean, if you choose the right man and he sees that you're, the idea is that relationships, intimate relationships, are supposed to be complementary. They're supposed to be supportive of one another. And the idea is that you don't necessarily need to compete with one another. It's probably not even good to compete with one another. It's better to be supportive of and complementary to one another. So maybe your partner has an intense career and you're primarily with the kids, and you're supporting him so he can go out, and he's supporting you so you can be home. Later, it can switch, and so now he's supporting you to fly and do things. So it's really important to pick a good partner. I think that's really the bottom line, is all of this is contingent on picking the right person. It's probably one of the most important decisions of your life.
And if you didn't, you can divorce them.
You can divorce them, and you can find somebody. But, then learn from the past so you're not repeating.
Well, we're nearly finished. I have a few British people I want to ask you if you know, but I would just like to say with 30 years of clinical experience packed into the Child Healthy Divorce, you have provided a real lifeline for people. So beyond buying the book, where can our listeners follow your work and listen to your guidance online?
So they can go to www.komisar, Komisar, my last name.com, and they can see everything I've written, and they can make an appointment if they want a consultation. I'm a clinician first and foremost. And then I'm on Twitter and I'm on Instagram and all kinds of things.
You're not taking appointments with people.
I am. I do. I see 30 hours of patients a week.
And travel around the world and write books.
I do all that. See, I couldn't have done that. So I will say I'm a poster child for what I believe in. I wanted to write this book. I as a young clinician starting out, I saw this phenomenon of children not doing well when the care was delegated too many hours to other people. But, my husband and I looked at each other and said, this is not the time to write a book. This is a time to just be with our kids and maybe work a little. I kept my pinky toe in my work just so I could keep my license and keep it going. But I worked so little, knowing that I could, ramp it up later. I think again this idea of a seasonal life is really important, because I didn't write the book the 15 years earlier. I waited to write the book till I was 50. And when I was 50, then I wrote the book, and suddenly I had this, career that I could never have imagined when I was younger. So I want to help women to feel less frightened that if they don't jump on some train, there's never another train coming, because that's the fear that women have. And I was never afraid that the train would, trains were coming all the time, and I could jump on a different train. And I think we've really terrorized women to make them believe that there's only one train to get on, and if they miss it, then they'll never get on another train. Because I have a lot of women in my book that I interviewed that didn't really even start their careers till they were in their 50s. Yeah. And they're one of the most successful members of Congress in America didn't start her career till she was in her mid-40s. And her youngest child was, I think, 8 years old. And the truth of the matter is, she said she wished that she had waited till he was 12. So, I think just we give the wrong messaging to women. We scare them.
Because it is gone. When it's gone, it's gone. And that is kind of the reason I panicked and I had 3 more, because I could see that my oldest daughter was 10. She was getting really independent. And I thought, I loved that time. I really did. And I'm lucky that I didn't work too much. I was probably a better mother than I am now. But, luckily these kids never sleep, so I still see them a lot. All right. For a deeper look into how she discusses these delicate family dynamics, you can watch Dr. Erica Komisar on What Parents Need to Know About Divorce's Impact on Kids, which provides excellent context on how she frames protecting children from adult pain. Do you know, before you leave, who Gemma Collins is?
I do, but not well. Yeah.
What do you know of Gemma Collins?
I only know the name, and I don't know who Gemma Collins is. So.
Oh, you've got to see some memes.
Okay.
Some memes.
Okay.
She calls them. She's a really great UK TV icon. She's built a massive career out of the kind of emotional outbursts and separation anxiety you probably deal with toddlers. Yeah, she'll be like, I'm claustrophobic, Darren.
Oh.
Yeah, she's really funny.
I'll look at them.
Okay.
I've heard the name, yeah.
Do you know Maya Jama?
No, I don't know these names.
You're allowed, because you're so busy, but welcome to the UK.
Yeah.
Okay, Maya Jama is sort of like our Kardashian.
Okay.
She's like really beautiful and really successful. She does different things than the Kardashians. She presents a lot of things. She has an absolute refusal to stay in one place. Yeah. Interesting childhood herself. Yeah. Bonnie Blue, do you have thoughts on that?
I've heard of Bonnie Blue, but again, I don't know these. I feel remiss, and maybe I'm showing my age.
No, you're not at all.
Anyway,
it's because you're American. You don't have to know.
It could be.
Bonnie Blue, I think maybe don't look it up.
Yeah. Okay.
She's in the adult entertainment industry, but on a wild scale, where there are people who are professional irritants in all industries, where they'll do things for clickbait. She's got a very specific marketing model. I would like to know what you thought about her attachment style, but I won't.
I'll have to take this list and go do my homework.
Okay. Do you know Jedward?
I I don't. I feel guilty that I don't know any of these people.
You love Jedward.
Okay.
So they're twins, Irish twins, who
Okay.
found fame on the X Factor. They sing, they dance. They're Jepic. They should put the letter J in front of everything. They're great. Okay. Wayne Lineker?
No.
No. Okay, he's Gary Lineker's brother. He's like a aging nightlife mogul who's famous for partying with very young women. Just a few more. Alison Hammond.
Oh boy, I'm feeling
She's
really.
good. She's the queen of Birmingham.
Okay.
Daytime TV, but also Bake Off. Are you familiar with the Great
I
British
am.
Baking Show?
I know that show.
In Connecticut, you would know that.
I know that show.
She's on there now.
Yeah,
She's
yeah,
amazing.
I know that show.
Lorraine Kelly.
I don't think so. No.
You should have gone on Lorraine while you were here.
Okay.
Wonderful chat show presenter for breakfast. She's Scottish. She's done really serious journalism, but now it'll be light, a cat fashion show in the morning and nice guests. She's great. Robin Ramesh.
I don't think so. No.
They're my really good friends.
Okay.
Rob Beckett has an actual podcast called Parenting Hell that he started in lockdown with my other friend Josh, and they're just really funny guys. And then my friend Ramesh is an incredible comedian. Rob and Ramesh do these like feats of strength. I think you'd really love them.
But that would be wonderful.
Last one, Rylan Clark.
I don't think so.
Oh
no.
my gosh.
I know.
Well, you have to
I
come-
should have had this list
No,
first.
you know why I made the list is
Yeah.
I didn't think you would know these people.
No, I didn't. I don't,
But-
and I feel badly that I don't because they all sound wonderful.
Well,
So-
they're all very interesting
Yeah.
from a psychoanalyst perspective, I think. They're some of our best talent, and maybe
Yeah.
you'll come visit us again
I
soon.
would love that. I would love that, and I'm really appreciative that you had me on.
No, I love your work, and I think it's so meaningful, and I'm still confused as to why. I think just because you do have some right-wing organizations cheering you on, and they are some of the people who dismantle the structures that would allow women to get maternity pay and to do the things you're advocating. So you must feel like a political football being kicked back and forth.
I do. My story's a little funny in that when I first wrote Being There, I really thought I would be embraced by just all mothers because it was just a book about attachment security. And I was so rejected by the left that, I think the expression is dance with them that brung you. And the only ones that really were sort of coming to me and saying, your message resonates with us, were people that were more conservative. So, I said, I'll just speak to anybody. I'll speak to anybody on the left, on the right. This is not a political issue. This is a human issue. And so, I'm happy to speak to your listeners and say, this is not a political issue, and I am not a conservative. I am a centrist. I'm a mother, and I'm a psychoanalyst, and I'm someone who saw the impact on children of pressures on mothers, and am trying to do something about it.
We have a big left-wing mother audience with me, so thank you for your time.
Yeah,
I
thank
so
you for
appreciate
having
it.
me.
Thank you.